Marcus Hale was a man whose face appeared on business magazines and news channels with regularity. At 41, his name was synonymous with success, one of the youngest billionaires in the country, a tycoon who built an empire from real estate, tech, and finance. He moved in circles of power, where every handshake carried weight and every word was recorded for its market impact. But wealth, as he had learned, could be as isolating as it was liberating. With every dollar that padded his accounts, the number of people he could truly trust seemed to shrink. Conversations were polished performances. People either feared him, envied him, or wanted something from him. What Marcus longed for most was something so ordinary it almost embarrassed him to admit: authenticity. One evening, after another tiresome gala where everyone flattered him yet nobody asked how he was, Marcus stared at his reflection in the window of his penthouse. The city glittered beneath him, but it felt hollow. He thought of his father, a humble school janitor, who had once told him, "The way someone treats the person with the mop says more about them than how they treat the man in the suit." The next morning, an idea took root. Marcus drove not in his sleek sports car but in an old pickup truck. He wore faded jeans, scuffed boots, and a plain gray shirt. At one of his mid-sized companies, a bustling office building in the city, he applied under a false name for a temporary janitorial position. The manager, in need of extra hands, didn't ask too many questions. And so, Marcus Hale became Mark, the janitor. At first, the anonymity thrilled him. People barely noticed him as they hurried through the hallways. Some gave polite nods, others ignored him entirely, and a few barked orders as if he were furniture. The mop in his hands felt strangely grounding. For once, nobody expected brilliance or demanded decisions worth millions. He was just a man cleaning floors. But he also discovered something else: invisibility stung. Entire days passed where not a soul asked his name or how he was doing. He began to understand how easily society overlooked those it deemed unimportant. On his third day, he sat in a shadowy service hallway, eating a bland sandwich he'd grabbed from a convenience store. The bread was stale, the filling tasteless, but he chewed without complaint. That was when a voice broke through the silence. "Excuse me, did you forget your lunch again?" He looked up. A young woman stood there holding a small lunchbox. She was in her early 20s, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. Her clothes were neat but worn, her shoes scuffed at the edges. She had the look of someone carrying the weight of the world but still managing to smile through it. Marcus blinked, unsure how to respond. "You were sitting here yesterday with just a bag of chips," she said gently. "I made extra today. It's not much, but you can have this." She set the lunchbox beside him before he could object. Inside was rice, beans, and a small portion of roasted chicken. "You really don't have to," he began. "I know," she interrupted with a smile. "But sometimes people need a little kindness. Enjoy." And just like that, she walked away before he even knew her name. Marcus stared at the food, overwhelmed. He had dined in the finest restaurants, eating meals that cost more than most people's rent. Yet this humble dish felt richer than anything he'd tasted in years. He ate slowly, savoring not just the flavor but the gesture. The next day, she returned. This time she introduced herself as Elena. She worked as an administrative assistant on the 6th floor, juggling endless tasks for underappreciative managers. Her life, as Marcus soon learned, was anything but easy. She had lost her parents young and was raising her teenage brother on her own while working 2 jobs. Despite her struggles, she still found it in her heart to bring a second lunch for the janitor she barely knew. From then on, their paths intertwined daily. At noon, Elena would sit with him for a few minutes, handing over a container of food while they talked. At first it was small talk, weather, office gossip, her brother's antics. But soon their conversations deepened. She spoke of her dream to become a teacher, her fear of never escaping the cycle of poverty, her exhaustion from carrying responsibilities no young woman should bear alone. Marcus listened more than he spoke. And when he did share, it was not about board meetings or billion-dollar deals. Instead, he spoke as Mark, a man who had also known loss and pressure, who understood loneliness. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a billionaire, not as a powerful figure, but simply as a man. The week passed quickly, each day leaving Marcus more conflicted. What had started as an experiment now felt like something far deeper. He found himself looking forward to noon, not for the food but for Elena's presence. Her kindness pierced through the loneliness that had haunted him for years. But Friday brought the unraveling. Marcus was mopping the lobby when a black luxury sedan pulled up outside. Two board members from his company stepped out, clearly in a hurry. They spotted him immediately. "Mr. Hale, we weren't expecting you here," one of them exclaimed, striding toward him. The words carried across the lobby. Heads turned, employees froze, whispers rose like a tide. "Mr. Hale, did he say Marcus Hale?" Elena, coming down the stairs with files in hand, stopped dead. Her eyes widened, darting between the executives and the man she had fed all week. Marcus straightened slowly, mop in hand. He sighed, so much for staying invisible. The executives, realizing their mistake, stammered apologies and offered to wait outside. But the damage was done. Every pair of eyes in the lobby was fixed on him, most in shock, some in awe. Elena's gaze was different. It wasn't admiration, it was hurt. You're not a janitor," she said softly, almost to herself. Marcus set the mop aside and walked toward her. "Elena, I can explain. You let me think you were some struggling worker while I gave you food I could barely afford," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You could buy the whole restaurant, couldn't you? Was this all a game to you?" "No," Marcus said quickly. "Not a game. At first, yes, it was an experiment. I wanted to know what life was like without the title, without the money. But then I met you." She shook her head. "So I was, what? Part of the experiment?" Marcus's chest ached. "No, you were the part one didn't expect. Elena, you were the first person in years who treated me like a human being, not a headline or a wallet. You gave when you had so little, without asking for anything in return. Do you know how rare that is?" Her eyes shimmered with tears, torn between anger and disbelief. "I listened to you," he continued. "Not because I was curious for a study, but because I cared. I still care. The lunches, the conversations, they meant more to me than you can imagine." For a long moment, Elena said nothing. Then she turned and walked past him, leaving him standing in the center of the lobby with the weight of his confession hanging in the air. The days after were heavy. Marcus tried reaching out, but Elena avoided him. He couldn't blame her. In her shoes, he might have felt betrayed too. Yet he couldn't let it end there. So he waited, and one afternoon, he found her at the small cafe near her apartment, studying while her brother worked on homework. Beside her, Marcus approached carefully, not in disguise this time, but as himself. "Elena," he said quietly, "just hear me out." She looked up, weary but curious. "I don't want to buy your forgiveness," he said. "I don't want to erase the truth. But I need you to know that what you gave me, your kindness, your honesty, it's something I've been searching for my whole life. Money can buy everything except that." Her brother looked between them, confused, but Elena's expression softened slightly. She remembered the way he had listened, the gratitude in his eyes when he ate her simple meals, the gentleness behind his words. After a pause, she nodded slowly. "If you're asking for honesty, then here it is. I don't know if I can trust you yet. But I can believe that what we shared was real. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning." In the months that followed, Marcus respected her boundaries. He didn't shower her with gifts or flaunt his wealth. Instead, he supported quietly, creating a scholarship fund for aspiring teachers, though he never admitted it was inspired by her. He continued to spend time with her and her brother, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. And slowly, Elena came to see that beneath the billionaire's title was still the man who had sat in a dim hallway, gratefully eating the humble lunches she offered, listening to her dreams with sincerity. Their story didn't spread like wildfire. There were no headlines, no dramatic reveals. But in the quiet spaces of their lives, something profound grew. Because in the end, the richest thing Marcus Hale had ever received was not money, not power, but the simple, unassuming kindness of a girl who brought lunch to a janitor without knowing who he truly was. Marcus Hale's name carried weight in boardrooms, financial pages, and luxury circles. At 41, he was one of the wealthiest men in America, his empire stretching across real estate, technology, and finance. He lived in a glass tower penthouse, traveled in private jets, and had assistants who arranged every hour of his day. Yet despite all the glitter, Marcus often felt invisible in a different way. People rarely looked at him without seeing dollar signs. Friends became business partners, conversations became transactions, and smiles were rehearsed. Authenticity, the kind he remembered from his childhood before fortune, seemed extinct. His late father, a school janitor, had once told him, "The way people treat the man with the mop says more about them than how they treat the man in the suit." Those words echoed in his head more strongly now. That was why, one Monday morning, Marcus walked into one of his subsidiary companies not in a tailored suit but in faded jeans, boots, and a plain gray shirt. He had arranged with the building manager, under a false name, to take a temporary job as a janitor. For 1 week, nobody would know him as Marcus Hale, billionaire. He would just be Mark, the quiet man pushing a mop. At first, the anonymity felt liberating. Nobody demanded big decisions from him. Nobody angled for his money. But he quickly realized invisibility had a sting of its own. Employees brushed past him without so much as eye contact. A few treated him politely, but most acted as if he were part of the walls. Once, an executive snapped his fingers at him for missing a spot on the floor. During his breaks, he sat alone in a dim service hallway, eating cheap sandwiches from convenience stores. He thought the week might pass with nothing but silence, until the third day. "Excuse me, did you forget your lunch again?" Marcus looked up. Standing before him was a young woman with warm brown eyes and a worn messenger bag slung over her shoulder. Her dark hair was tied in a messy bun, and her clothes were simple, practical. In her hands was a small container. He blinked. "Oh, you were here yesterday with just chips," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I made extra today. It's nothing fancy, but you can have this." Before he could protest, she placed the container in front of him. "Rice, beans, and a small portion of roasted chicken. You don't have to." "I know," she smiled. "But sometimes people need a little kindness." She left before he could even ask her name. Marcus ate slowly, overwhelmed. He had eaten meals worth thousands, but this humble lunch felt richer than anything he'd had in years. The next day, she returned. Her name was Elena. She worked as an administrative assistant on the 6th floor, often staying late to finish tasks others neglected. Marcus learned she was raising her teenage brother alone after losing their parents. To make ends meet, she worked evenings at a diner. Despite her struggles, she still brought him a second lunchbox every day. Their conversations deepened. Elena spoke of her dream to one day become a teacher, though she doubted she could ever afford the schooling. She confessed her exhaustion, her fears, but also her hopes. Marcus listened, offering small words of encouragement but mostly letting her voice fill the silence he had carried for years. With her, he wasn't Marcus Hale the billionaire. He was just Mark, a man grateful for a shared meal and genuine company. By Friday, he realized he dreaded the end of his disguise. For the first time in a long while, someone had looked at him and seen not wealth, not status, but a person. What he didn't know was that the truth was about to come out, and it would test the fragile bond between them. Part 2. The Secret Revealed. Friday afternoon, Marcus was mopping the glass doors of the lobby when a black luxury sedan pulled up. Out stepped two sharply dressed executives, board members from his own company. "Mr. Hale," one of them called, spotting him instantly. "We weren't expecting you here." The name rang across the lobby like a bell. Conversations froze. Employees stared. Someone whispered, "Did he say Marcus Hale?" As in, the Marcus Hale. Marcus straightened slowly, mop still in hand. He muttered, "So much for staying invisible." Among the onlookers was Elena, descending the staircase with a stack of files. Her eyes widened as the realization sank in. The janitor she'd shared lunches with wasn't some struggling worker, he was the billionaire owner of the very building she worked in. She approached, her face pale. You're not a janitor," she whispered. Marcus set the mop aside. "Elena, I can explain. You let me believe you were someone else." Her voice trembled, though it wasn't anger so much as hurt. "I brought you food I could barely afford. You could have bought the whole restaurant." Marcus's chest ached. "I didn't do it to mock you. At first, yes, it was an experiment. I wanted to see how people treated me without the name. But then, I met you. And you were different. You gave when you had so little. You listened, cared, without knowing who I was. Elena, you made me feel human again." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "So what was I? Part of your experiment?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "You were the part one didn't expect. The most important part." Elena hesitated, torn between betrayal and the memory of his quiet gratitude each time she handed him a meal. She turned and walked past him, leaving Marcus with the weight of her silence. The following days were heavy. Elena avoided him at work, and Marcus couldn't blame her. He considered sending gifts, but he knew that would only cheapen what they'd shared. So he waited. Finally, one evening, he found her at a modest cafe near her apartment, studying. While her brother worked on homework beside her. "Elena," he said softly. "Just hear me out." She looked up, guarded. "I don't want to buy your forgiveness," Marcus began. "And I can't erase the deception. But I need you to know that what you gave me, your kindness, your honesty, meant more than anything money has ever bought me. I didn't pretend with you. Not about how much I valued our talks, or your dreams, or the way you reminded me of something my father once said, that dignity isn't about wealth. It's about kindness." Her brother frowned, whispering, "That's Marcus Hale." But Elena silenced him with a look. She studied Marcus for a long moment, then sighed. "If you're asking for honesty, then here it is. I don't know if I can trust you yet. But I believe you when you say our conversations were real. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning." In the weeks that followed, Marcus respected her distance. He didn't shower her with money or favors. Instead, he supported from the shadows, establishing a scholarship fund for aspiring teachers, never admitting it was inspired by her dream. He showed up in small, steady ways, not as a billionaire, but as a friend. Slowly, Elena's walls softened. She began to see that beneath the wealth and titles, Marcus was still the man who had sat in a dim hallway, gratefully eating the simple meals she had shared, listening to her dreams without judgment. Their story never made headlines. It wasn't a fairy tale splashed across newspapers. It was quieter, more precious. Because in the end, the richest gift Marcus Hale had ever received wasn't power or wealth, but the simple kindness of a poor girl who offered him lunch without knowing who he truly was.